Have you ever heard this before? You need to be mentored by a world-class leader every single week if you have any chance of achieving your goals. Or what about, you don't even need a mentor. You are a mentor. You are your own mentor. Well, I've heard both of those things, maybe not in as many words, but is the truth either one of those, or is it somewhere in the middle? Like most things, it's somewhere in the middle. And there is no one-size-fits-all approach to mentorship. Everyone has different needs and opportunities and goals, and even on the individual level, you could have a different need in that season than you did 3 years ago and then you will have in 5 years. So your relationship can be really fluid with mentorship over the course of your life. I can hear you now. Thanks, Andrew, for telling me something really obvious, that I have needs and that they're going to change over the course of my life. But that doesn't really help me know whether or not I need to go spend 20 hours looking for a very specific mentor in my field, or that I need to read all of the books, or that I shouldn't do any of those things. I'm still kind of paralyzed. I don't know what I'm doing here. And frankly, that's pretty relatable. My relationship with mentorship is by no means a perfect science, but there are some really helpful tips and tricks that I've learned that I think could be really helpful. So we already know that there's no one-size-fits-all approach, but we also know that growing intentionally is really important for us to be able to become the person that we want to be. So the first thing you need to do is to know what you actually want to grow in order to know what mentorship needs you have. And a great way to do that is to just know what you're focusing on in this time. And if you aren't sure about that, you can go check out my video on focus. Once you know what you need to work on, you can be on the lookout for people who are just a little bit ahead of you, or maybe a fair bit ahead of you in those areas. I've heard people say that 10 years ahead is kind of a good sweet spot, because they are far enough ahead that they have a lot of really, really good wisdom, but they're not so far ahead that they've forgotten what it's like to be in your place, right? For example, it's a lot easier for me to remember what it's like to be in college than it is for me to remember what it's like to be in elementary school. The problems and the challenges that are being faced and the advice I'd give is totally different, and actually way more helpful for somebody who's in college than for somebody who's in elementary school, because I don't really remember the trials and struggles of being in elementary school. Third grade problems are just not as relatable to me anymore and not as memorable to me as college problems. And so having somebody who can still relate to where you are, but have enough perspective to go, yeah, it's tough, but here are the few things that you can do to get to where you want to go, is really, really helpful. So you figured out what you need to focus on, and most of them you can just practice and get better at, but there's a few that would be really helpful to have some outside guidance on, and say that those things are work and being in a relationship with a significant other. And you go, okay, for being in a relationship, I would be on the lookout for somebody who has similar values to me and is in a thriving relationship. And I'd go, okay, what are they doing? And I might ask them some questions about how they've been so successful, what practices they do on a regular basis, and the kind of person that they looked for. And then I would go, okay, how do I take some small steps to go in that direction based on the advice that they just gave me in that conversation? So it doesn't have to be anything super formal, especially at the beginning. You just figure out, you just take small steps forward. And if your first small step forward is having a conversation and asking, great. And then if that leads into a more formal mentorship opportunity, also great. But those don't happen very often. Most people don't have a bazillion mentors that are all awesome and carving out tons of time every single week for them. And frankly, most people don't have 5 or 10 hours a week to spend with a bunch of different mentors, right? So having more informal mentorship relationships is a lot more beneficial for most people, because it takes the pressure off, but it also gives you small achievable goals. And then say you know somebody at work who started in your same position, but is now 10 years further along in that company and is 3 or 4 levels up the chain of command, and you go, wow, that's amazing. And you ask them, hey, how did you do that? What were the most important practices that really helped you get ahead and accomplish your job and do it well? You may not need to write it down in the moment, whatever they say, but you're definitely going to want to write it down later and start doing and practicing and acting on those things. And the great thing about mentorship is if the people that you talk to and ask for feedback see that you're implementing that feedback, then they're going to want to keep giving you feedback. Being the mentor rather than the mentee also feels really good, right? So that's why it's such a mutually beneficial relationship in so many cases. But what if you are in a weird stage and you want to make a total pivot in work or in relationships, and you don't really know anybody that's got what you're kind of looking for, that has expertise in it, or that you would really respect what they have to say because you can see that your values don't quite align. Well, that's where content becomes really helpful because people have probably written a book about it, and if they haven't written a book about it, then they made YouTube videos about it or a podcast about it, and you can go on and you can see people who have those values, who are doing the thing that you want to do. Whether it's real estate, relationships, or finance, you can find content about what you want to grow in and slowly grow your expertise in that field and get better and better without necessarily having conversations with other people. Now, having conversations is really helpful because you get very tailored, specific feedback to your specific question and situation. But having that content that you can consume and work on and grow in is also really helpful. For example, my wife and I really like Ramit Sethi. We've never met him, we've never asked him any questions, but we bought his book and learned so much, and he broke it down so simply that we didn't really need to ask him specific questions because we read the book. And then he also has a podcast, the I Will Teach You to Be Rich book and podcast, and we can listen to that. And some of the specific questions that we would have had get answered by the people that are on the show, right? Would it be helpful to be able to ask him very specific questions for 10, 15, 20 minutes? Yes, but on the other hand, we don't know anybody else who's in that space and is breaking things down as simply as he is. And so being able to read his book without specifically talking to him is actually so valuable, and more valuable than having a 20-minute conversation with somebody else that we already know. And so that's one of the beautiful things about all of the content that's accessible, whether in book form or online, is that you can identify where you want to grow and go out and grow in it. And usually consuming that content and really applying it will get you to a really high level. And at that point, then you probably need to start figuring out who's in the space that can really help you with that tailored expert feedback. But at that point, you're probably doing a really good job in whatever that thing is and have the network to be able to find people that would help you get there. And so it's a very natural progression, whether you're finding people that are just a little bit ahead of you and getting better that way, or through content that you read or see online to help you build in your skills and what you're focused on. So all that to say, find the things you want to focus on and where you need the most help, and find somebody who can help you take the slow and steady path to growth, because that's what's going to make the most lasting change in your life.